Okay, sent it.
Thank you very much. Okay. Hello, Avram, how are you? Shmuel, how are you? We missed you yesterday. You able to hear clearly?
Yeah, thank you. Good morning.
Morning. Okay, we're about to start. We're on Mem Daled. We just ended Mem Daled and I'm an Aleph. One second, let me get another sitter. 1 second. The last thing we said yesterday is a practical halacha regarding if a person is having wine from the land of Israel or having fruits from the land of Israel. Let's say they import fruits from the land of Israel to the States. Let's say dates from Israel, right? That might be popular, with hashgacha and all the trumos and maestros were taken off. And you're eating the dates. And after you eat the dates, the bracha achron on dates is the ala eitz val priya eitz, because it's from the land of Israel. It's a special food from the land of Israel. And you don't say a burn of flushes like you would say on an apple or a pear. Rather, you say the ala eitz val priya eitz bracha. And since the fruit is grown in the Holy Land, you're supposed to say, let's say towards the end of the bracha, and I'm taking the version for the Ashkenazim out first, and we'll look at the Svardim. At the end, towards the end of the bracha, Hashem tov v'meitim lakol, v'noda l'cha ala aretz v'al peiroseha. Baruch atah Hashem ala aretz v'al peiroseha. That's what you should be saying if you have from the fruits of Israel, if it was grown in Israel. So if you go to Eretz Israel, and I presume the fruits that you're eating in Israel are not made in China, I presume the fruits that you're making in Israel were grown in Israel. So then that's how you're supposed to say the blessing. And similarly, if you're in America and you have those fruits from the land of Israel, in America, you would be saying that you would be more specific. The difference is you're being more specific. You're saying al peroteha, al peroseha, not just al aretz val peros. And therefore that's the switch. Now for the Sfardim over here, they make changes in all three. Whether you had fruits from the land of Israel, wine from the land of Israel, or grains, cakes that were that were from Israel. A lot of times people can't go to Israel, and they bring back some. They take on the plane. They take some rugala from Israel, or Angel's Bakery cakes from Israel, and they come back to the States and they have it for breakfast. But they need to know, and while they're in Israel, if they're Sfardim, they say al michiyata v'al kakalata. Instead of saying al micha v'al kal, they talk about the specific nourishment from the foods of Israel. Al michiyata v'al kakalata, and they will end Baruch atah Hashem al art al michiyata. Now regarding wine, which I think is a common thing, people have wine from the land of Israel. So the Sfardim will say also. That's interesting. In the art scroll, I think this art scroll sitter only makes the change for the Ashkenazim if it's fruits from the land of Israel. It does not make any special change if it's wine from the land of Israel or it's from cakes from the land of Israel, like the Sfardim will make a change. But I think I saw a different art scroll sitter where they also added a change for the wine. that they will say al-gafna, al-aretz, al-pri-gafna. For once, we have to look more into that regarding the Ashkenazim, wine from the land of Israel, whether there'll also be a change. Good morning, Michael.
Morning, Rabbi.
Morning, because the Shulchan Aruch speaks about fruits from the land of Israel. But everybody agrees, both Ashkenazim and Sfardim, if it's fruits from the land of Israel, you must change the text of the bracha towards the end, and that's our Gemara over here. We just had the Gemara Mem Daled. Just review the Mem Daled on an aleph on the bottom of the page. That the Gemara says, Rav Chizda Amar ala oretz al peiroteha. Rav Chizda says that the bracha is, there's 3 lines from the bottom on Mem Daled on an aleph, is ala oretz, the conclusion for having fruits from the land of Israel, pomegranates, dates, figs, olives, right? We said it would be ala oretz al peiroteha, and outside the land of Israel, if it's not grown in Israel, it's ala oretz ala peirot. But that's what the Gemara says. The Gemara says one rabbi said ala oretz ala peirot, one rabbi said ala oretz ala peirot teha. The Gemara says it depends where you are. In Israel, Rabbi Yochanan was talking in Israel. Israel is grown in Israel, therefore ala oretz ala peirot teha. And even though the Gemara just mentions what ala oretz ala peirot teha, it doesn't just mean the end when you say Baruch Atah Hashem al Oretz al Peroteha, but rather right before that as well. You say Ki Atah Hashem Tov Meid al Kol Melech al Oretz al Peroteha, Baruch Atah Hashem al Oretz al Peroteha. That everybody, Ashkenazim and Sfardim, all agree that you have to make that change from fruits that grow in the land of Israel. And that's what we ended off yesterday. So therefore, a lot of time it's important to know where the fruits come from. You're eating dates in America. You bought dates. Are they from Israel? And then it has a change. There's a change in the way you say the bracha achrona. Mike, is that clear or not?
Yes, Rabbi, but is it in the books? We never do it, no?
It's in the book here. I got this call. I'm Magen Avram Siddur. Now, I can't tell you the old Siddur. Here's the Magen Avram Sfardi. You recognize the Siddur?
Sure. Yeah.
And you'll see, take out yours, you'll see it says, you want to take out your sitter, Mike, look at him at a sitter. You have a sitter next to you? Have a Sfardi sitter next to you?
Yeah.
I want you to look at the bracha me'ein shalosh. What does it say towards the end of the bracha me'ein shalosh? When you're having ala michya or ala gefen or fruits in the land, what does it say towards the end?
Al perotea, you're right, yeah. Al shel eretz Israel omer perotea.
You see that? It's in the small print, so it's not noticed so much. You know what I'm saying? But that's our Gemara. That our Gemara teaches us this point, and it's again, we're being more specific. We're thanking Hashem for the land and its fruits, not just the general fruits, and the land and its fruits because it was grown in the land of Israel. Now, Mike, in your sitter, it also says if the wine is from Israel, correct? What does it say in your sitter?
Al peri gofna.
And what does it say if the grains are from Israel? Let's say the cakes are from Israel. Does you have also in your sitter?
Mihyatah ve'al kalkalata, right?
That's exactly right. So that would be the minhag for the Sfardim.
So the people in Israel, they really only read those.
Exactly. Unless the irony would be if they import. If they would have wine from the land from other countries, go to the land of Israel, then they would not say al pri gafna, because it's not in Israel. It has to be grown. It has to be made in Israel.
So if I open tomorrow, a bottle of wine made in Israel, you do al peri gofna.
Exactly.
Wow, interesting.
Right.
A lot of wine that we drink is from Israel.
Exactly.
Okay. It's good to know, Rabbi.
Right, but you should know, Mike, the Shulchan Aruch itself talks specifically about fruits from the land of Israel. They didn't mention openly the wine, but the Sfardim, they understand it doesn't just mean fruits of land of Israel. They would say it would apply to wine or grains as well. They would make that's the minhag by the Sfardim.
Got it.
Okay. Now we're turning the page. We're on Mem Dalet on the base, 44b. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak. Now we're going to be Amar Rabbi Yitzchak bar Avdimi Mishum Rabbeinu. Rabbi Yitzchak bar Avdimi says in the name of Rabbeinu, our master. Who's our master? Who's Rabbeinu? In his time, Rabbeinu would mean Rav. Like today, in the days of Rav Ovadia Yosef, you say Rabbeinu, you might have meant Rav Ovadia Yosef, but you say Rabbeinu, but Rabbeinu was Rav. Said in the name of our rabbi, Rav, al habeya, on eggs, valmine kufra, and all different types of meats. What's the bracha? B'tchila mevarech shehakol. The bracha that you say before you eat an egg or before you have meat is shehakol niyeh b'dvaro, or shehakol niyeh b'dvaro. Different. However, your text, how you say the bracha. Ulbesov, and after you eat the meat or after you have the egg, there's a bracha achrona. What's the bracha achrona? Mevarech borei nefashot rabot. The bracha achrona is borei nefashot, baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, borei nefashot rabot v'chetronon. Hashem creates all different nefashot rabot, all different types of people, all different types of living things that are living, animals. Hashem creates people, Hashem creates animals, and he provides them whatever they're missing, the basic needs that they need to live. Not only that, not only does we thank Hashem, this is how Tosfot explains the text of the bracha of Borei Nefashot. Every time you say Borei Nefashot, what are you saying? You're thanking Hashem for providing the chesronon, the basic things that people lack in life that you need to live, like bread, water. But not only you're thanking Hashem for the basic staples of life, you're also thanking Hashem al kol ma shebara lahachayot behem nefesh kochai. That Hashem gave you things that you don't need to live. He gave you fruits. He gave you other type. You don't need meat to live. He gave you things that you should enjoy, kosher enjoyment in life. Kosher enjoyment shouldn't be overdone, but you need to recognize that Hashem, and I think it's the way Hashem shows his love for you. If he shows his love, he doesn't just give you exactly what you need to live. He makes it sweet for you in life. He gives you fruits, this beautiful, delicious fruits. He gave it to you that shows, it's like a parent showing their love for their child. They want to give them some good stuff. So Hashem, really God in a certain way, was our Avinu Havarachaman. He's our Father, Avinu Malkeinu. He wanted to show his great love for us. So not only did he give us what we need to live, he gave us other things also that we could enjoy, that we could have kosher enjoyment. And that's Al Kol Ma Shebara. Besides what he gave for us, Mahachios Behem Nefesh Kochai, and to provide us with other foods, to keep us alive. Barachei Olamim. So we thank Hashem who provides life to all the worlds, to this world, Chei Olamim. He provides life to the next world, to Olam Haba. That's one of the ways to explain the meaning of this bracha. Now, over here it says, yeah, that's how they translate Barachei Olamim, right? It gives life to both worlds, this world and the next world. So that's the bracha you should say for having meat or eggs. But what about if you have a vegetable? So now we know lahalacha l'maaseh, Borei Nefashot is not only limited to meat or eggs, but it goes to vegetables, fruits, and all those things. However, in the Gemara, there's a machloket. In the Gemara, there are opinions that say that the Borei Nefashot was only instituted only if you ate certain level of foods, like meat. It's a high level food. And eggs, we're going to see from the Gemara that eggs are very healthy. Rabbi Feinstein always used to order an egg when he go for breakfast. I don't know but the Gemara says eggs are very happy, very healthy. So therefore it provides great nutrition for the person and so on and so forth. And therefore he says only on the eggs and on meat would you say burn the fashol, according to this opinion of the Gemara. Of a yarkalo, but if you had a vegetable, there's no obligation, and obviously I would think you would not, according to this opinion, you would not say burn the fashol on a vegetable. It's not as important as meat and as eggs, and therefore you don't say burn the fashol. That's not the halacha. If you said the halacha would be if you have vegetables, you say burn the fashol. You have fruits, you say burn the fashol. Rav Yitzchak Amar, and according to this, if you have a cup of liquid, cup of water, you would not say burn the fashol according to this opinion. But that's not the halacha. Rav Yitzchak Amar afilu yarka. Even if you have a vegetable, you also say a burn the fashol. Of a mayalo. But water, you drink water, you're thirsty, you drink water, but it's not such an important, we need water to live, but it's not something that gives us great pleasure, and therefore we will not need to say a burn of fashol according to his opinion on water. Rav Papa Amar, one area, Rav Papa says afilu maya, even on water you say a burn of fashol, and that's the halacha. The halacha is that we say burn of fashol on water as well. Mazutra avid Rav Yitzchak bar Dimi. Rav Zutra, now the Gemara brings different rabbis, how they conducted themselves regarding different foods that they ate. Because we just brought 3 opinions in the Gemara, 3 or 4 opinions on when do you say burn the fashol. So Mazutra, one in Nathan. Just to bring Nathan up to date, we have 3 opinions in the Gemara. When do you have the responsibility to say burn the fashol? Is it only after you had meat and eggs? But if you had vegetables, you will not have to say burn the fashol. The second opinion was even vegetables, you have to say burn the fashol as well, but not over water. And the third opinion, even over water, you have to also say burn the fashol. And those are the 3 opinions in the Gemara. And Mazutra Avid Rav Yitzchak bar Dimi. And Mazutra followed the opinion of Rav Yitzchak bar Dimi only after eggs and chicken and meat, and not after vegetables or water. Rav Shimi Barashi Ovid Rav Yitzchak. Rav Shimi Barashi followed the opinion of Rav Yitzchak, that he said burn the fashol even after vegetables. But if it was after water, he did not say burn the fashol. And the Gemara says, the simanah, what's the siman? Now you want to remember, it's very important in the Gemara to know who says what, which opinion followed which opinion. And remember, in the time the Gemara was done by heart. They learned by heart. They did not learn. They did not learn from written. It wasn't written. The Gemara is oral, is Torah Sheba'al Peh. So they created certain simanim, certain things that they did certain things to be able to figure out, to remember who says what. So what did they do? So the Gemara said, "V'simanach," the way to remember who says what. Chad ketrei utrei kechad. The person with one name followed the opinion that has 2 names, and the rabbi who has 2 names followed the opinion of the one name. That's the easy way to remember. So therefore, good morning, Sammy.
Morning.
Therefore, Mazutra, his name was written without his father. Sometimes a person's name is that the Gemara records a person's name by his own name, like Rava, Abaye, Hillel. Doesn't mention his father's name. And sometimes the Gemara, Yeshua ben Karcha, sometimes the Torah mentions the father's name as well. But here in our Gemara, the way these rabbis have mentioned, Mazutra is mentioned by one name, Mar Zutra, the master Zutra, and he followed the rabbi that was named with 2 names, Rav Yitzchak bar Dimi. And then we had the other rabbi who was named by 2 names, Rav Shimi Barashi, who has 2 names. Who did he follow? Rav Shimi Barashi, he followed the rabbi that was mentioned with one name, Rabbi Yitzchak. So that's how you're going to remember. If you want to remember who says what, the rabbi with two names agree with the rabbi with one name. The rabbi who was with one name agree with the rabbi who has two names. Okay. Amar Rav Ashi. Rav Ashi says, I know Zivad Matkirana, when I remembered a vidnika kulo. That means not all the time that I particular to say burn nefashos over all different types of foods, even water. But at times when I was at top of my game, I went ahead and I also would say it even on water as well. The question, what did he say? Even after water, he would say burn nefashos. What? Medicine, you don't have no pleasure. It's not, the water is not there you're drinking water because you're thirsty. When you're taking water with medicine, just to get down the medicine, you don't even make a bracha on the water. No bracha rishona, no bracha achona. But if you take orange juice to take down your pill, therefore because you have pleasure and enjoyment, from Tosfos says that. Because Tosfos says because you have enjoyment, when you take orange juice or soda's not so healthy. They have some medicine, then you say a bracha. But who it did? If you said take soda for the medicine, you have to say bracha on the soda because you're having the pleasure for the soda that you have. Now, have a great day. Now, it's hard to understand this Gemara. I'm just going to throw out a question. It's hard to understand this Gemara, but what does it mean? When I remembered, I followed all opinions, and I said burn nefashot even on water. If you felt it's important to say burn nefashot on the water, so we should always have remembered. What does it mean? So they question the discussion about what does it mean when I remembered I said it over the water as well. Let's see any commentary. Yeah, so they say they have to look up commentaries that they discuss what this language. But the bottom line is, it meant to say that he didn't feel that you always have to say burn nefashos on water, but on certain times he said burn nefashos on water. But we're going to see later on. I mean, the halacha is, yes, we always, all the time, when we're drinking water not just when we're drinking water for the purpose of we're thirsty, we're drinking water and so on and so forth, we will say, burn nefashot. So the Gemara says, Tnan, kol sheta'un bracha la'acharav. Anything that requires a bracha after you eat this item, ta'un bracha lefanav. Anything that needs an after bracha always needs a bracha that precedes the food. There is a phenomenon. There is a food. There's some type of foods that require, or let's say, the Gemara's thinking is talking about foods. There's some things that require bracha before the ain't ton bracha lachara. The Gemara's thinking we're talking about foods. We'll see at the end of the day. Maybe the Gemara is going to change. But the Gemara is thinking there are certain items that you do not require the bracha after, only the bracha before. Now, until now, the only thing we know about this until now is, one of the things that we know, in order to say a bracha afterwards, you have to have a certain amount of the food. But the Gemara is understanding that you had that amount. And yet, you do not require a bracha afterwards, which would sound like against the opinion of Rav Papa. It would sound like that maybe it's referring to water, that water needs a bracha before and not a bracha afterwards. And this will be a question, meaning because we identified there's this phenomenon that something needs a bracha before and not afterwards. And we found just recently there's a dispute whether water needs a bracha afterwards, whether vegetables needs a bracha afterwards. So this writer that says there is this concept is something that does not need a bracha afterwards would seem like it's a Mishnah. It's a Mishnah that it's going against the opinion of Rav Papa because it's saying there is this phenomenon. You don't need to say a bracha afterwards sometimes. So that's going to be the Gemara's challenge to Rav Papa. So the Gemara says, Bishlam Rabbi Yitzchak bar Avdimi, according to Rabbi Yitzchak bar Avdimi, La Fuke Yarka. He says that you don't not say a burn nefashos on vegetables and water. So therefore, when it says there's something that does not need a bracha afterwards, it's referring to eggs needs a bracha afterwards, meat, but not vegetables. And according to Rav Yitzchak, who says that you do say a bracha achron on vegetables, but he says you don't say a bracha achron on water. So lafukim maya. So the Mishnah is coming to say that you make a bracha on other things, but not water. El Rav Papa lafukim maya. According to Rav Papa, what is the Mishnah excluding? Which item is there that you don't say a bracha afterwards? Rav Papa said you say a bracha on everything afterwards. Well, even water, you have to go in and say, you had water, you were thirsty, you have to say a bracha achrona. So where is this phenomenon? I don't know if I said hello to Akiva. Akiva, good morning. What is this phenomenon that you don't say, that there's something you don't say a bracha afterwards? So the Gemara says, someone was trying to get in? Okay. So the Gemara says the following. Lafuki mitzvot. Mitzvot, when you perform mitzvot, right? When you take a lulav, right? You say a bracha before you put the lulav properly in the proper place. But you don't say a bracha after the lulav, after you finish the mitzvah of lulav. So therefore, there are certain things. That's what the Gemara says when it says in the Mishnah that there are certain things that require a bracha before and do not require a bracha afterwards. That's coming to exclude mitzvot. That mitzvot, morning Morris. That mitzvot, there are mitzvot that only require bracha before and do not require bracha afterwards. Let's say you learn Torah. After you learn Torah, you say a bracha before you learn Torah. You don't, right? You're supposed to say a bracha in the morning. You wash your hair, right? You say a bracha before. You don't say a bracha afterwards. Right, that's not food, right? It's not talking about food. But foods, you have to bring all foods, you have to say bracha afterwards if you have the amount. But it's talking about mitzvot. There's this phenomenon that they're like Rashi says. What do you say? Shabbat Keh is also before. Right. Like Rashi gives examples of tzitzit. You put on tzitzit, talit. After you finish, when you take off your tzitzit, you don't say bracha after you finish your talit. And tefillin, Rashi says, you put on your tefillin. Did you say a bracha after you finish? You said a bracha before you did a mitzvah.
But we're talking about food, Rabbi.
Yeah, right, so that's what Mr. Amos is saying. The Gemara thought we're talking about food, and the Gemara said that we're not, when we say there are certain things that do not require bracha afterward, it's not going on food, it's going on birchat ha-mitzvot, on mitzvot. Yes, Ariel, you want to say something? No, when you make a bracha, great question, Ariel. When you say a bracha on Torah in the morning, I'll tell you what Ariel's really asking. Generally, we have this concept that let's say a person puts on tefillin in the morning, right? So you put on tefillin in the morning. Then a person decides for some reason you're going to put on tefillin again. Let's say on a fast day, on a tanit, right? The Sfardim put on tefillin by mincha, correct? Or right, you put on tefillin. Many tefillin on a fast day, you put on tefillin by mincha as well. On a fast day, on a tanit, you put on tefillin shachrit and you put on tefillin at mincha. Is that what you do? So at mincha, you make a new bracha on the tefillin, correct? Because there was a lot of interruption from the morning to the afternoon, right? This Sunday is Shavasa v'Tammuz. This Sunday is a fast day, right? So, yet by Torah, you say a bracha in the morning. The Sfardim say, Baruch atah Hashem, Elokeinu melech haolam asher kiddushon mitzvotav v'tzivanu al divrei Torah. Is that what you say? Harevna Hashem Elokeinu divrei Torascha. You say, and then you say, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam asher baruch habanu mikol amim v'natan lana Torah. That's the bracha for learning Torah that you have to say before you learn in the morning. And then you say, Yivrach Hashem Yishmerecha, Vaydav Hashem Moshe, you say Psukim, you say Torah after those things, and that covers you the whole day. Why? So Ariel is bothered by the question, why does it cover you the whole day? You learned in the morning because you said it was the learning. The learning was followed because you said some Psukim, right? You said some Psukim following those, the Birchas HaTorah. And yet, you don't need to make a new bracha in the afternoon. So, right? Because you said, "Vaydav Hashem Moshe lema That's the Torah learning that you're doing for the Birkat Torah. So why don't you have to make a new bracha in the afternoon? Didn't you make hefsek? Didn't you make interruption? You went to work, you went to the job, why don't you need a new bracha? So Tosfos says that since you have to learn constantly, you never lose focus of the learning. You're just stepping aside, like you're closing the book, the sefer, you're going to do your work and you're coming back. And therefore, it's not really that you really lost focus, and therefore you don't have to make a new bracha when you go learn in the afternoon. Right. So Mr. Amos says that when you're working, you're using the Torah also. Right. So Mr. Amos says a different answer than Tosfos. Mr. Amos says that when you're working, you're constantly, the words of Torah are on your mind. You're thinking about it. You can't do interest. You can't charge interest to a fellow Jew when you have to say brachot when you're at work, when you're eating, and you're constantly involved. Things that apply to halacha while you're in the workplace doing halacha. There's laws that pertain to work that have to be halachically correct. That's what he wants to say. Why there's not really called an interruption. Okay, but if you go to sleep at night, you sleep for a half hour. That's considered interruption. At night, going to bed, you go to sleep for a half hour. Certain amount of time. You wake up at 2:00 in the morning. You wake up and you can't fall back to sleep. And of course, what are you going to do if you wake up at 2:00 in the morning? You can't fall back. You're going to go learn Torah, right? Then you have to say Birkat Torah because you went to sleep. You were sleeping at nighttime, and you slept a certain amount of time. That requires you to say. Then you want to learn 2:00 in the morning. You want to listen to a shiur at 2:00 in the morning. You have to say. Listening is a good question because you're thinking about it. But we have to see more if listening would be. But of course, if you're saying anything, definitely you would have to go ahead and say Berachos Torah. So the Gemara says, but Livnei Marava, the people in Eretz Yisrael, the Basad Mesalkit Filayu Mevarchi, they had a minhag that they would say a bracha when they would remove their tefillin. They said a bracha. Tosfos says only the people in Eretz Yisrael, they would say the bracha of when they removed the tefillin, and the bracha was like lishmor. Bracha Gemara says Ashek bracha to Hashem Elokeinu Melech Olam Asher Kiddishanu b'mitzvotav v'sivanu lishmar chukav. That we keep the chok. What is the chok? The Torah says that you put on shemart as a chukah, you keep the chok of tefillin, and the people of Bnei Marava and the pasuk says they understood this pasuk referring to tefillin miyamim yamima, that you have to put on tefillin only by day. They understood that the mitzvah of tefillin is only by day, on a Torah level, only by day and not by night. We hold on a Tosfos points out on a Torah level. The mitzvah of tefillin is by day and by night. The Rabbanan says that we don't wear tefillin at night. Why don't we wear tefillin at night? Because if nighttime people fall asleep much faster than daytime. You might fall asleep with your tefillin on, and if you fall asleep with your tefillin on, you might emit gases, and your body might not be so clean when you're sleeping. And therefore, the Rabbanan said you can't go ahead and wear tefillin at night. Because I presume they felt once you're going to allow people to, if you're going to allow people to wear it at night, then we're afraid they're going to remain wearing it. Remember, they used to wear tefillin the whole day years ago. So we're afraid if you're going to start letting them people wear it at night, they're going to wear it the full sleep. I think Moshe Feinstein has an amazing tshuva that I think he says, we got to look it up again. He says he was talking maybe in Russia when if a person had a situation that he would not be able to put on the tefillin the whole day, whatever the case was back 100 years ago in Russia, whatever it was, he said if he went to sleep at night, and they got up in the morning and it was still technically dark, nighttime. But since you went to sleep, then there's no concern that you're going to fall asleep in the tefillin if you wear it. He allowed the person to put on the tefillin at that time of the day because he was not able to put on tefillin the whole day during what we call daytime. He allowed him if he went to sleep, because we said that the issue is that when you're not at nighttime, you might fall asleep with your tefillin on. So he said that when you went to sleep, you got up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and let's say it's still dark and it's still night, he allowed that person under special circumstance. We don't have that situation today that we can't take tefillin with us at any part of the day. We have the ability, the people have the ability to put on the tefillin. Right, no, then he would make it. So Rav Moshe first said, maybe he might have said that maybe you should not say a bracha, but on the tefillin. But then he said, I think he allowed them because if you tell the person that you don't say a bracha, they're not going to think it's anything. So maybe that, therefore he allowed the person even to say a bracha, or else he wouldn't even be strong about doing it. Something like that. You can look at the tshuva. It's a fascinating tshuva from Moshe Feinstein. But again, the people in Eretz Yisrael. Now, by the way, even according to us, that we hold that tefillin on a Torah level, the mitzvah tefillin is at night. Rabbinically, we don't put on tefillin midrabanan at night. Still, tefillin is called a mitzvah tasei shehazman grama. Tefillin is a mitzvah. Yosef Tzaddik, I don't know if I said hello to you. Tefillin is a mitzvah that has a time bound because we don't put on tefillin on Shabbat. And we don't put on tefillin on Yom Tov because Shabbat is the sign. Yom Tov is the sign. And therefore, women are patur from tefillin on a patur because it's a time-bound mitzvah. Even though if we hold on a Torah level, you day and night, you put on tefillin, but in a Torah, you do not put on tefillin on Shabbat or on Yom Tov. So because the people in Bnei Marava, they held that you cannot wear tefillin on a Torah level at night, they said a bracha when they took off the tefillin. They would say that we are keeping we're doing the mitzvah right now. We're doing a biblical mitzvah by taking off the tefillin right now. That we're keeping this mitzvah. And the way one of the Mefarshim explained, let's say other mitzvot, let's say, for instance, the mitzvah of tzitzit, right? Let's say the mitzvah of tzitzit is by daytime. The mitzvah of tzitzit let's say there's the two opinions, the Rambam and the Rosh, how to understand tzitzit. The Rambam understands there's no mitzvah of tzitzit at night. That's the Rambam's opinion. The mitzvah of tzitzit is by day. Therefore, a guy who gets married at nighttime, right, Ariel? A person who gets married at night, and the minhag of the Sfardim is they put on a talit by the chuppah. He will not make a bracha al mitzvah but tzitzit, because on nighttime there's no mitzvah of tzitzit. He will not make the bracha at that time. He might say a shechianu because it's a new garment. You make a shechianu. Before sundown, you'll make a bracha. That's a good question. We'll have to see what's the minhag. But if you have a mind to wear it as a talit, you should make a bracha. I mean, we have to look up halacha and practice. For instance, on Erev Yom Kippur, right? We come to shul Erev Yom Kippur by Kol Nidrei, right? We put on our talit before sunset, right? We say a bracha. Okay, there the talit is because if we're going to daven, we're going to pray. We say a bracha. We have to check up for the chatan what he would do in that case. If he's doing by daytime, I could see a logic why he could say the bracha of the satir b'tzitzit because when it's daytime, but he will not. But if it's at nighttime, he will not say the bracha of the satir b'tzitzit, but rather he will say the shechianu because of the new garment. Because the talit has two parts to it. It's a garment, and it has tzitzit. And the new garment, it's a nice, expensive garment. You don't get this every day. So you say a shechianu, therefore at nighttime, say shechianu. The Rosh holds that if you have a day garment, that you wear a day garment that you wear by day, there is a mitzvah of tzitzit on that at night. If I have a four-cornered garment that I generally wear by day, right, which is generally my tzitzit. My tzitzit I wear by day. If at night before I go to sleep, I take off my tzitzit, right? But do I get a mitzvah? So the Rosh says I do get a mitzvah for wearing my tzitzit at night because it's a day garment, and a day garment, a garment that's worn by day, is also a mitzvah of tzitzit. So let me give you the practical application. Let's say my tzitzit ripped. It was nighttime. Let's say tonight. It was 9:30 at night. My strings ripped off, and now I'm wearing a four-cornered garment without tzitzit because the strings came off. According to the Rosh, I can't wear this garment. I must remove this garment because if I don't have kosher tzitzit, since this garment is generally worn by day, it has an obligation of tzitzit, and I can't wear a four-cornered garment without tzitzit. According to the Rambam holds there's no mitzvah of tzitzit that night, so I could wear a four-cornered garment at night without tzitzit because there's no mitzvah according to the Rambam. So I always like to think of the Rosh's opinion because when it gets dark, I don't remove my tzitzit when it gets dark. I wait till before I go to sleep, I take off. So according to the Rosh, I got a mitzvah for all the time, the morning that I was wearing my garment. When I was wearing my garment, until I took off my tzitzit, I got a mitzvah. You should know there are some people that even sleep with their tzitzit. Mr. Amos, you heard of such people? There are some people that even sleep with their tzitzit. Okay, so the Gemara says, L'bnei Maravah, the people in the land of Israel. Good morning, everybody. The people in the land of Israel. You people are from the land of Israel, right? Yeah. See that they walk in. Bnei Maravah. The Bnei Maravah has just walked in. The people from the land of Israel, when they would take off the tefillin, they would say this bracha of lishma chukav because they were not allowed to wear their tefillin at night according to the Torah, according to their understanding that the Torah forbade you to wear the tefillin at night, and therefore they said a bracha when they removed the tefillin. So according to them, so lafukimai, what is the case? Where is the case that we say a bracha before we do this mitzvah, but we do not say a bracha afterwards? The people in Eretz Israel would say a bracha after they put on tefillin, just like before they put on tefillin. Right before when do you say the bracha on the tefillin? Right before you do the mitzvah, before you tie the knot, you say the bracha, and you have in mind for the shalyad and for the shalosh. You should remember the bracha on your shal. When you say the bracha, you're not just saying the bracha for your hand only. You're having in mind, I'm saying the bracha for my hand and for what? And for my head. The Ashkenazim say two brachot, one on the hand and one on the head. But you should know, even the Ashkenazim, when you say a bracha on the shalyad, everybody, all Ashkenazim that are on board the screen here, when you say a bracha on your shalyad, you're also supposed to have in mind the shalosh, even if you're an Ashkenaz. Except there's two, it comes out that for the shalosh, we have two brachot if you're Ashkenaz. The bracha on the shalyad goes for the hand and for the head, and the shalosh bracha also goes for the head, obviously. So you have two brachot for the shalosh according to the Ashkenazim. Now, right, so you should know if you're smart, if you talk between, let's say you talk about the New York Mets or the Yankees, if you went ahead, you put on your shalyad, you start talking about something else, and now you're about to take on the shalosh. You have to make a new bracha. You have to make the bracha on the shalosh. If you're now, so the Gemara says, Lafuke, what is it coming to Lafuke Rechani? The Gemara says the case that you have a bracha before and not a bracha afterwards is what? On a smell. If you're smelling a b'samim, you say a bracha before you have b'samim, but you do not say a bracha after b'samim. So therefore, we found that's the case. That you have a bracha before, and you do not have a bracha afterwards. Meaning, the Gemara is saying, according to Rav Papa, when it comes to foods, all foods you say a bracha before, and all foods you say a bracha afterwards. If you had a certain amount, if it's zayit or reviyit, whatever you had a certain amount, you say bracha afterwards. But where is the case that you find that the Mishnah says that you say bracha before and not after? Is smell. And what's the reason? Presuming the reason is smell is not the same as eating. Eating, we have much more benefit, much more pleasure, much more nutritious. You had food. You could live without smell, without having a nice samim. I know there are some people in this world that think they can't live without samim, if you know what I mean. Rahman al-Islam. You know, there are people that think they need the samim to live. It's a problem. But we understand that you don't need this to live in the samim. It's a kosher. Hashem gave certain kosher pleasures for us. He was nice to us. He gave us some things that smell nicely. But since it's not as beneficial as food, the Chachamim did not require us to say a bracha after you had the smell. On which besamim? What? And I would say you make bracha on samim that's appropriate besamim. Things that's what I would say. I would not think you make bracha on samim that's not appropriate. Samim that have the ability to damage the person, that I would believe we don't make a bracha on that type of stuff. Right, but there, very good. Very good, but Mr. Amos is pointing out the point that the bracha on the Tilat Yadayim, really you're supposed to say the bracha. We would want you to say the bracha before you wash your hands. But why do you go ahead and you say the bracha after you wash your hands? Because your hands might be dirty, and therefore you can't say the bracha if your hands are dirty. Therefore, it's important to note that you should make sure not to dry your hands until you first say the bracha and then you dry your hands. A lot of people make the mistake. They say the bracha until they wash their hands. They couldn't say the bracha before they wash their hands because their hands might be dirty. Then they say Netilat Yadayim, but again, then you dry your hands because you want it. Because therefore, since you said the bracha before you dry your hands, it's like you said the bracha before you completed the mitzvah. Because there's a whole question halacha. If you wash your hands, you dried your hands, are you allowed to say the bracha if you dried your hands? The question is, it might be too late. There's different opinion, there's discussion about that. And I personally think that, I think sometimes the mistake happens when people are young and they're in school, and sometimes the children, when they line up, I wonder if this is, I'm just speculating. Let's say if kids, they wash their hands for hamotzi, and the teachers are training the kids to say hamotzi on bread. But I'm wondering if the kids, by the time everybody lines up, many kids already dry their hands. Then they all say the bracha. They say the bracha Netilat Yadayim together, but the kids' hands already been dried. And therefore, and the kids learned that when they were young, they were saying Netilat Yadayim after they dried their hands. And therefore, when they get older, they continue to do that, make that mistake. When you make a mistake when you're young, you continue doing that mistake. Okay. Yes. Yes, it would. Yes, I think that's the translation that's given. Okay, have a great day, everybody, and we'll see everybody back tomorrow. And we thank the people from Bnei Marava for coming in. Every word counts. Every word is a mitzvah. I want to thank you, Joseph, and everybody.